Mankind's greatest fear is mankind itself. And I have inconveniently portable and high quality audio. Hello, I'm Master Marslander, and today we have quite possibly the coolest DAP that I have ever seen. We're talking about the HiBy R4X Evangelion. So what this is a HiBy R4, but has been rebranded, retooled, and even also slightly upgraded to have this amazing Evangelion theme. And we've done an unboxing of this device already, and if you haven't already seen it, I highly suggest that you go watch that. I'll put it somewhere here or in the description to go and check that out, because the packaging for this was amazing. It is amazing, and definitely worth watching that video for, just to see the packaging, the amazing packaging that went into this collaboration. Now, this is actually the first DAP that we have discussed here on the channel. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and take a minute or two here to kind of go over in general what a DAP is. So if you're already well familiar with DAPs and you don't want to have listen to me re-explain to you what you already know, here's a timestamp that you can jump to. But for those of you who don't know DAPs, let's talk about what DAPs are. What is a DAP? A DAP is a digital audio player. It's pretty much what it sounds. It's a device that takes a digital audio file, converts it into an analog source that you can then listen to with your headphones. It's usually a device that is portable for convenience, and that has a lot of the time its own built-in navigation system, its own UI, so you can navigate through your music library. Probably the most predominant, well-known, and kind of entry into the existence of DAPs ever known is the Apple iPod. That was a DAP in all intent and purposes. And obviously things have changed a lot since the iPod. The iPod has been discontinued for a number of years now. And that is in many ways due to the invention of the smartphone, which has in many ways kind of outclassed the traditional DAP or traditional iPod sort of device, because it, smartphones were basically, and this is how the original iPhone was marketed as, is a phone that is also an iPod. Does it both, and along with several other features. So the smartphone became the replacement in a lot of ways to the existence of DAPs, to the iPod. But DAPs didn't go away. It became a bit more of a niche, but became an adoption from the audiophile community in a lot of ways. And as a result, DAPs have evolved significantly since the iPod days, which was just basically an MP3 player and not much else. Nowadays, because they're, again, so much geared towards the audiophile community, they have to have many, many features that really highlight the quality and performance and output for high-res, high-resolution, high-quality audio. And a lot of the kind of doohickeys and doodads that go along with that audiophiles really look for in these portable devices. Features like having higher output power to be able to power more demanding, more inefficient headphones than something like just your smartphone's power output could do on its own. Or being able to listen to higher quality, lossless audio files. These are the kind of features that audiophiles, the community or whatever, look for in these portable devices. And these are features that just flat out did not exist back in the iPod days. So yes, in general, the DAP has been kind of replaced by the smartphone. But smartphones, especially now when you don't even get to have a headphone jack in your phone anymore, they're not really geared towards an audio-centric landscape anymore. And because of that, the DAP is still going strong here in 2025 or whatever, because it is audio-centered, audio-centric. It is a device built specifically for high quality audio that is portable, convenient, and in this case, just cool. Enter the R4 Evangelion Edition. A DAP unlike any DAP I've ever seen. This is such an incredibly cool collaboration with what is, to me, one of the best animes really ever made. Total classic. And the love and attention to detail of this is just phenomenal, absolutely stunning. Not only is it just a super incredible colorway, super cool color scheme, but just look at all these details. You have your Nerve logo here, you have Eva Unit 1 down here, and you're going to see as we get further into this just how incredibly far they went to really sell the theme of this Evangelion edition of the R4. And this isn't just a reskinned HiBy R4 either. Yes, it has this cool colorway and all this theming for sure, but it's actually also a slightly upgraded model from the standard R4 with improved RAM and ROM, and also a little bit of additional tuning. Getting a closer look at the overall build of this thing, this is an all aluminum metal shell, a metal all aluminum chassis, and it is this lovely kind of matte texture that makes it feel really nice and smooth and soft, but also not super crazy slippery in your hands. On the side here, we have Evangelion X HiBy, and then our volume rockers up and down right there. And then right here is our micro SD card slot to give it additional storage. We have a 4.7-inch IPS display. And then here on the opposite side, along with our high-res audio, little like sticker thingies right there. They're not actually stickers, they're actually lasered in there. We have our power button, and then our back, forward, and play pause button as well. And then up here at the top of the unit is a locking button to ensure that the functions are locked so that you're not accidentally pausing or stopping or skipping tracks. It'll just lock everything up so you can't operate the device unless you unlock it again. So that way you're not having accidental pocket inputs. In terms of your headphone outputs, as it's labeled right here, we have a single-ended and a balance-ended 3.5 and 4.4 millimeter pentagon, respectively, for your headphone outputs. And then also your Type-C connector right here, both for charging and file transfers. When we turn the device on, boop, screen comes on. That looks amazing. We'll talk about that in a second, but you get this little status LED up here at the top. And also the back of the unit glows green. Also included with your HiBy R4 Evangelion is this super freaking cool lanyard that is, again, themed to the Magi system from the show. Amazing. Super freaking cool. So now let's get into the nerdy stuff and talk about specs. The UI is based on Android 12. We have a Snapdragon 665 SoC. We have a quad ESS DAC array, so 4 ES9018 C2Ms. It incorporates separate individual compression pathways for PCM and DSD. We have Class A amplification with a power output up to 500 milliwatts into 32 ohms. A total harmonic distortion as low as 0.0005%. Femtosecond grade audio clock crystal oscillators. There's full support for your favorite audio streaming apps, including Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Qobuz, Amazon HD, etc. It supports DSD 256, up to PCM 768 kHz at 32-bit, and also supports MQA if you choose to go that route. In terms of wireless connections, we have Bluetooth 5.0, but also we have Wi-Fi with both 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz connections respectively. The R4 Evangelion has 64 GB of internal storage, but also has support for up to 2 TB of additional storage through microSD. The unit weighs approximately 231 grams, has a 4,500 mAh battery, and a battery life that they advertise for 15 hours of runtime. In practice, mine has lasted almost 2 days. All right, let's get into the real fun stuff, starting with the power-up animation here. Hold the button down for the power-up. We start with our little HiBy screen as it transitions then into Nerve. Nerve only. Oh my gosh. And there we go. Top secret HiBy Evangelion. Oh, there it is. Okay, there's our lock screen right here. You got your clock right there. Nerve only. We gotta unlock this thing. Check it out. Oop. Unlock. Boom. Freaking dope. So now here we are at the home screen, and as you can see, the entire UI interface of this device is based off the Magi system from the show. It's super freaking cool. We have the clock here, our player, everything about it just screams Magi. It's just super cool. Nerve only everywhere. So now let's go ahead and look at just some other really cool attention to detail in the UI. If I adjust my volume on my rockers here, it brings up my volume adjustment, which is an AT field. Look at this. It's an AT field. And you can adjust it either with the buttons or by sliding. Whoop, whoop. And yeah, it'll increase the field if you increase the volume, decrease the field when you decrease the volume. That's freaking dope. Another fun little addition to the UI is that there are widgets that you can add to your screen. And I added the plugin countdown. Start, oh no, We're going down. We got 5 minutes left of charge. What I do wish is that this thing actually activated when you unplugged the device from charging, and it just did this automatically. I almost feel like it can do that somehow. I haven't figured out yet how to make it do that, but it's a fun little widget that you can just drop on here and play with if you want to. But it's just so cool to look at. What I can show you though is what happens when you charge it. Plug in your charge. Boom! Look at that. How freaking cool is that? And yeah, the more that it charges, the more filled in these little black bits are going to be. So it's just so cool. The UI is so cool in this thing. And I'm only touching the surface here. The more you kind of play around with it, the more you kind of navigate it, the more like Easter eggy kind of stuff you're going to find. The attention to detail of the theme here is just absolutely the most fun and the coolest shit. I'm having such a blast playing with this thing. Down here at the very bottom is where we have our initial apps. Starting from the left, we have our albums folder. In here is where you're going to find the album covers for all the music that you have either imported to the device via USB or from your micro SD card. And you can just kind of scroll through here to find the album you want to listen to. And included right away when you first open this up is this picture folder. When you tap in there, you get this awesome collection of Evangelion themed wallpapers built into the device that you can then use to change the background wallpaper of the HiBy. So well, let's say I want to go, ooh, this guy I think is super cool, just a very cool image of Ava. And I will show you later how you can make these into actual wallpapers. Over here on the far right, we have a web browser, and I don't recommend it. One, it's very, very slow, but also it's not English based. It's in Chinese. If I search something, ham, go, it's going to just, yeah, you can already see it's doing weird stuff, and boom. Yeah, that doesn't really help me very much. So a web browser is, I guess, nice to have, but I'm not gonna be able to make any use of this. So I don't even bother. I don't recommend even using it. The second option here is your file system. This is where you can go in here, find your movies, your music, where you're gonna have the file structure of everything you import into the device. It's gonna be in here. So you have access to that right here without even having to connect the DAP to a PC. Your third option here is your HiBy app, the HiBy music app. And this is where you're gonna be doing the majority of your shindigs, your enjoyment is gonna be right here from the app. And like I said, there's full support for all of your favorite audio streaming apps, Spotify, Tidal, whatever. When you first load up the app, it's gonna ask you, hey, what streaming apps do you use that you wanna import your albums and stuff from? And then you can just go ahead and do that. And then when you're in here, you can go ahead and tap on that little cloud icon. This is where you're gonna be importing your streaming apps like Tidal. In my case, Tidal is what I use. So I can click on my collection and it's going to bring up my playlist that I've made myself, but you can also look for individual tracks, albums, artists, everything. Full support for Tidal and other streaming applications here to just have quick access to your entire library of music without having to download anything. It's just, again, this connects via Wi-Fi. So as long as I have a Wi-Fi connection, I can just stream it. But also, if I really wanted to, I could also download from my playlists onto the device. So you have both options here. You're not limited to either one. If I click on this little icon up here of, my little personal user icon, which at the moment is nothing, you get some pretty cool options. You got your download manager, scan for music, all that kind of stuff, but you also have an equalizer, which is just a standard equalizer. You could play around with that if you want to. But even more cool than that is the PEQ, the parametric equalizer. And this is some powerful stuff right here. You can just make this however you want, almost unlimited amount of adjustment to get whatever kind of tone or I don't know, profile you want for your music. You can do it right here. Freaking super crazy cool, but also something very, very cool that I hardly ever see is MSEB. Tap on that. This is really interesting. Basically what this is again, a kind of EQ, but that adjusts things based off of, like terminologies. Like, do you want your overall temperature of your sound to be cooler or warmer? You want light bass, deep bass? You want fast bass or thwompy, thumpy bass? It's really, really cool. And again, it's a lot more kind of, adjusting the definition of your sound as opposed to just kind of, fussing with the frequencies. It does the same thing basically, but if you don't want to have to, if you're not very familiar with frequency response and you don't want to fuss around with numbers, here it just breaks it down to just terms. Do you want it to be soft or crisp? Do you want it to be slow or fast? It's just, this is super cool. And I've been having just a ton of fun playing around with that. Some other audio settings, if we scroll down, we can bring up our settings menu here, which is the gearbox. Boop. Go into our audio settings and you get even more stuff. You have your gain. You can choose if you want to have low gain, middle gain, or high gain. You can choose your lineouts. There's some additional plugins. I haven't played around with that, but there are, I suppose, some plugins that you could play around with to get some additional stuff. You have separate individual gain compensation for DSD. You can adjust your channel imbalance. There's just so many ways to play around with in terms of your audio. It's so cool. There's so many options. It's almost overwhelming, but to have so many options is just wild and just, it's so freaking cool. Now let's talk about wallpapers really quick because this is important. If I go to wallpaper here and I want to choose my wallpaper from my included super cool Evangelion image library here that they provided me. Let's see. Oh, I like this guy, right? Oh yeah, this guy's super cool. I'm going to make it my wallpaper. Boom. It's now my wallpaper. If I bring this back, hey, cool. Look at that. My background's my wallpaper. How do I get it back to default though? This is important because I had this problem. Scroll down, settings. If I go to wallpaper again, and I go to my gallery, and I go back in here, that original background is not in here. You cannot just swap back to it. But don't worry, you can get it back really easily. It just took me a minute to figure this out. So rather than going into your wallpapers, what you're going to do instead is go to display. Then down here in display, wallpaper reset. Tap that, tap OK, and boom, it's back to default again. That was scary for me because there was a full day where I had it set to a wallpaper that I was just playing around with and I could not get it back to the default. But that's how you do it. So now you know you don't have to suffer the way that I did. Now, as wonderful of a UI as this is, and it is genuinely just wonderful, and it gives me joy every time I get to use it, it's not without its drawbacks. One, the UI itself is just a little bit sluggish. Everything just kind of takes half a second to do anything. And it's clear that it is based off of an Android OS that is just skinned so hard and so thoroughly that it's just a little bit sluggish. It's not the worst. I've certainly had much worse snappiness and speed and response from an Android device before, but it's just, it's just the little nuances of it. It's a little slow, a little sluggish, and a couple little hiccups here and there. Sometimes I'll have certain settings set in a certain way, and I come back sometime later and those settings have maybe been changed. It's not all the time. It's never been so obnoxious that I've gotten upset about it. It's just little tiny things like that here and there happen. The other thing that's a little bit unfortunate is the display itself, while it is very colorful and nice, does not get very bright. What you're looking at right now is max brightness. Maximum brightness. I'll show you right here. There's our brightness right there. It can get incredibly dim. So dim that you can't even see it anymore. But in terms of how bright it can get, it's very limited. Now inside, it's probably not that big of a deal. This is certainly bright enough for me to use this here in the house. But going outside with this, particularly during the day, it makes it extremely difficult to see the screen in the sunlight if it's really, really bright out. And being out in the desert where I am, that's pretty frequent. One other kind of pain point with the UI here, with this custom skin, is the app logos, the app icons. They're a little, I don't know, I understand. They're there to fit the design and aesthetic of the overall Magi Ava theme, but like especially here, I don't know what that is supposed to be. I don't know what that's supposed to be, and I don't know what that's supposed to be. So the icons themselves, until you kind of learn what they are, don't mean anything to you. So it's a little hard to navigate what you're actually looking at. Some of these are a little bit more obvious. Files, file manager, the clock, the calculator, but some of these are just a little too like, what am I looking at? Like, unless you really know what the HiBy Music logo looks like, it's just, I mean, I understand this is being really, really nitpicky, but it's just something to point out here that sometimes when you're talking about design, ease of use and clear understanding of what you're looking at can sometimes be more important than having the aesthetic. So, okay, so that's what that is. These little mountains are supposed to be the gallery. I wouldn't have known that. I don't know that just by looking at it. But, again, just a little nitpicky here. But it is something that frustrated me a little bit when first using this thing, because, again, I had no idea what these were. And only by hitting them and exploring them did I actually figure out what they were and what they did. So I do wish the display would get brighter. I do wish things were just a bit more responsive. But otherwise, there's little else to complain about. It's such a beautiful UI. The skin is so cool. And everything's just so... Come on now. I know I can get it. There we go. Nope. See what I'm talking about? I'm trying to show the other apps and it's just not... There we go. Yeah, it's just a little fickle. You do have to just learn the nuances of how to operate the UI here. But otherwise, it's just fantastic. And... obviously, the theme is on point, and in terms of the functionality, all the kind of extra features you can do, and especially in like your sound settings, I can't get past just how impressive all of this stuff is. Especially stuff like the MSEB and the Chromatic EQ. That's so cool, and it gives you so many options of just possibility here. Yeah, it's just dope, man. It's so freaking cool. You can do so much with this thing. It's just ridiculous. But it's not perfect, and so it's not going to be without a couple little headaches. Sudden wardrobe change, because it turns out when you have a newborn, it's kind of hard to film your reviews in just one day anymore. So how exactly does the RE4X Evangelion perform? How does it sound? It's really, really nice sound. This is a good midpoint between something that's very clinical and something that's very pleasing. It takes a very kind of natural, clear, and almost transparent approach to your sound, where everything sounds very, very clean, super clean, and almost in a kind of a clinical sense, where you're able to really deep dive into the finer details. Not so much so as something like a topping sort of sound profile, where it's almost like sterile in terms of how clinical it can be. Because this is Class A, you get just a little bit of like a pleasing warmth and texture to it that makes it while still very clinical and very accurate sort of sound, it's very fun, very enjoyable, and never at any point did it get boring for me. In fact, the closest kind of sound profile that the R4 Ava here has is to my HiBy R4, which if you've seen my review for the HiBy R4, you know how much I love my HiBy R4. But this actually brings up an interesting question. In a world where we have stuff like portable dongle amplifiers, why the DAP? Why a DAP? Why not just use a smartphone? Because smartphones obviously have been kind of the replacement for DAPs. Since the invention of the iPhone, which again, the big selling point of the iPhone when it was launched was that it was a phone and an iPod in one device. And there's no denying the convenience of that. But the thing is, the phone, the smartphone, it does everything. And because of that, it's such an integral part of our lives. And we rely so much on it to get information that it's always a distraction. I can't really sit down and just listen to music on my phone, because if I do, what ends up happening is I'll get a notification and I have to pause the music to see what the notification was. Oh, was there something on the news? Did someone text me? Did my favorite YouTuber post something new on YouTube? I mean, there's all these different things that distract us. So I'm immediately stopping my task, stopping my enjoyment of listening to music to check on what else is new, whatever notification is getting thrown at me. It's distracting. So having the standalone device, a standalone DAP, for the purpose of just listening to music, it means that I'm sitting there just for the music. And I think that there's really value in that. Yes, it's not as convenient.
as just having the device that does everything, like what I'm doing right here with my phone. But I really do think that there's something to be said about disconnecting. And I realize how that's kind of strange for me to say because I'm wired directly into a device right now. But it is a disconnection. It's a disconnection from the world that is your phone so that you could just dive in to your audio. And I genuinely think there's some value in that.
Now let's continue our comparison with the HiBy here, because this is where there's kind of a divide in how portable audio is approached. You either have your standalone one device DAP, or you have your little dongle amp or DAC amp option for like your phone. Comparing these two specifically, the HiBy is already a pretty nice little powerful amplifier for its size and form factor. It has 400 milliamps of power, which makes it so that it's able to power stuff like by 300 ohm Sennheiser HD600s here. This is a high impedance headphone, and it needs more power than just a phone alone can provide to be able to get real good quality listening experience out of it. At 400 milliwatts, the HiBy is able to power these fairly well, but I do tend to have them maxed out on their high gain setting, volume cranked all the way up to get this to the volume that I want it to be at, to what I would consider to be a nice, loud enough volume in a closed off, quiet room like here in my home. But I would not say it's loud enough to keep me from getting distracted from the outside world. If I'm going portable with my HiBy, walking around, going jogging, whatever, it's not going to really reach volumes loud enough to drown out kind of the ambient noise around me. Especially, I mean, this is a closed back headphone. That's probably not really something you could do anyway. But just to make the point here, the volume that I can get with my 600s here is nice enough for in-home, but not really quite enough for outdoors. So that means that I can comfortably make these go louder without blowing my ears out or getting fatigued. But the HiBy has that limit. It's already reached its maximum. So it's interesting that with the DAP here, the standalone device, it's not just an amplifier. It is slightly more powerful, 500 milliwatts. And with the DAP, I'm able to reach equal volume to my HiBy when my HiBy is maxed out on high gain at 55%. Now hold on, before you start to think, well, wait a minute, are you saying that the Ava here, the R4 Ava, has almost twice as much power as the HiBy? No, absolutely not. What I'm saying is, yes, I can get equivalent volume of the HiBy at around 55%, but once I'm hitting like 60-ish% on the volume on the R4 Ava, it's officially too loud. It's getting louder than it really needs to be. And while yes, it can even go higher in terms of volume, you're not going to want it to, because you start to get extremely quick diminishing returns after around that 60% volume, at least with the Sennheiser HD600s here. What starts to happen is it starts to get so loud that it begins to distort. Now, obviously, this has the R4 Ava has an extremely low harmonic distortion rate. It's excellent, but it's not limitless. There are limits to what you can do. If I start to really pump and dump crazy amounts of amplification into this headphone through the Ava here, it'll get loud, but you're not going to be having a good time. It starts to get really distorted and crunchy. So there are limitations, and we want to have limitations. That's how the world works. But yeah, I just want to make sure there's that distinction there. Yes, it can make stuff like this HD600 sound louder than the HiBy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you want it to go. It is not twice as powerful as a HiBy. It just can make things really, really loud when it maybe doesn't need to. What I have noticed though, which is interesting, and maybe this is more to do with how the amplification is treating stuff like dynamic drivers in this HD600, is that where that amplification, that extra kind of power that you get with the Ava that you don't get out of something like the HiBy, where it does shine is with planars. Here with my HE6 SE, HiFiMan HE6 SE, extremely difficult to drive headphone. It's a power hungry beast. It sounds great on the R4 Ava. I'm able, again, about 50% power is about equal to what is max power on my HiBy, but I can bump this up to 80% and it still sounds nice and clean. That might be, again, more of a testament to the planar drivers in this versus the dynamic drivers in the HD600s, but planars do an excellent job with this Ava device, and it really works out because look at the color matching of all this. You probably can't tell from the camera, but these are a little bit on the purple side, so purple, all the purple. Oh my gosh, it really does sound fantastic. But no, I'm afraid it still isn't enough to run tungstens. Sorry. Another advantage you have with having a standalone DAP like this is that you avoid this kind of situation. So there's two worlds of thought here in terms of what is more convenient. Is it more convenient to have one device that does what you need in terms of just what it's supposed to do? This is just for audio if you just want one device for audio. Or is it more convenient to have your phone, which you're going to be carrying with you all the time anyway, plus a dongle amplifier? Because really in either school of thought, you're going to end up probably having both your phone and one of these with you at all times. Just a matter of, do you want this to have to be connected to your phone or not? Now, I'm not trying to talk trash about the HiBy here. The HiBy is still fantastic and wonderful and still one of my favorite portable audio things in the market right now. I love the HiBy. And even though the R4 is a little bit more powerful, and they do sound fairly similar, there's still a couple of advantages you get out of a standalone amplifier like a HiBy. The HiBy has a lot of the same kind of functionality in terms of just raw outputs and options that the DAP here does, but additionally, the HiBy can do a little bit more, where you have your physical button switch for gain, but also, of course, you have the infamous HiFi X bass boost button, or the fun button as I like to call it, which gives it just a really, really lovely, very natural sounding bass boost, and something that you're not going to really have with the HiBy here unless you really go crazy with figuring out your EQ profiles. And then in terms of how they sound, again, I said that they sound very, very similar, and they do, but I'm going to give the HiBy a slight edge here. Because even though the HiBy can't power things quite as efficiently as the R4 Ava, the HiBy still provides just a little bit more kind of smooth and natural and refined sound than you do with the HiBy R4. Particularly when it comes to vocals, the HiBy sounds a lot more natural, a lot more kind of a real vocal timbre, whereas the Ava here, very, very close, but just a little bit more almost slightly artificial sounding, a little bit extra kind of synthetic, I almost want to say, kind of top into your vocal range. They're very, very close. So for me, I'm going to find myself in an interesting place here where for the longest time, this has been my solution, or something very similar to this, for going out to like shows and stuff, traveling, whatever, to have my headphones with me to do proper listening, because this has done such an amazing job. But I don't think there's really any denying the convenience of just having your own standalone device. Sure, I'm going to have my phone with me anyway, but now I don't have to fuss around with putting my phone out, going through my backpack, finding my HiBy, getting the cable, finding the cable, plugging it all in. It's just these little steps, these little rituals that don't really matter in the like greater scheme of things, but to not have to worry about that at all, to not have to worry about doing these little connections and rituals to get your thing to work, it's just kind of nice. And that being said, though, and I understand that I have a bit of a privilege here to have the option of both, but I'm going to be continuing to do both when I'm doing traveling. If I'm going to be going to a show, I'm going to be bringing both of these so that I can ensure that I have the option of, crazy X-Bass boost and also just that little bit extra kind of richness and flavor and refinement, but also the convenience and the crazy amount of EQing that you can do with the Ava here. And I do want to point out here really quick that sure, the smartphone has kind of made all of this a little obsolete. The smartphone does all of these things in one little package. It might not be able to do, the power output, but it does Bluetooth. So if you're just going to be doing Bluetooth headphones and that's all you need, then you're probably going to be fine. But there's something that's going on with smartphones today that I think is being really ignored that I feel needs to be addressed. This is dull as dirt. This is just a black rectangle. Sure, I gave it a fun little back cover here, but there's nothing to this. There's no character to smartphones anymore. They're all the same. They're rectangles that are just nothing. There's nothing on them. And the UIs are just, nothing, just a whole nothing burger. There's nothing here. There's nothing exciting about it. There's no character to it. And I understand that you can go into like the Google Play Store and you can download skins and stuff like that. But it does not even come close to competing with something that has as much character and love and appreciation as something like this. This is beautiful. This is gorgeous. Even if you're not an Ava fan, look at this. This says something. This speaks out. It has character. It has an artistic spin to it that makes it interesting. It's fun to show this to people. It's fun to play with this. No one's impressed with this. No one cares. It's just another black rectangular box computer thing. This is something interesting. People want to know what this is. So there's something to be said about that. There's something to be said about letting your devices be fun again. You know what I mean? Let them be fun. I'm so sick and tired of stuff being boring. And that's why I'm so in love with the R4 Ava here. It's not perfect by any means, but it does a phenomenal job in terms of just being an audio player. Freaking fabulous. It's very powerful. It sounds really fantastic, and the whole theming in the Ava UI is remarkable. It's so good. It's so true to its source material, and it might be a really nerdy, geeky thing to be excited about, but it's something new. It's something new. That's all I ask for. Give me something new. Give me something different. HiBy did that, and in my opinion, they went full balls to the walls with it. Oh, man. So yeah, just put a little fun out there. Put a little character out there with all these devices. For goodness sakes. The world is dreary enough as it is. Let us have some fun. Anyway, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this. See you again soon.